Thank you very much, John. And as an Irish dairy farmer, it's a huge privilege for me to be in New York for New York Climate Week. We are dairy farmers right down the south of Ireland, down in County Cork. I guess you're looking at the logo and seeing Rathard Show Team as opposed to Rathard Dairy Farm, but hopefully my presentation will explain some of that and why we run the farm the way we do. So just to give you an idea, I'm over 3,000 miles away from here. We have 1.5 million dairy cows in Ireland. I guess for you guys, looking at a lot of the news headlines, and we definitely, our sector definitely made the news headlines in the US. There was talks of trying to save the world by reducing the national dairy herd by 200,000 cows, which that worries me a lot for more than one ways as a dairy farmer. Just to keep it in context, there's 9.4 million cows in the US. US is the second biggest dairy producer in the world, second to India. And across Europe, 23 million cows. So that's a lot of cows that we need to reduce methane from. Just to give you a bit of background on my farm, that's my wife standing alongside me. She's actually milking the cows as we speak because there's a five hours time difference. We have three daughters, and I thought about coming here and why do I farm in the way I do, and it's those three young girls we do what we do to show them there's different ways to do things. We farm 270 acres. We're milking 180 cows on a split calving system. That was a spring calving system up until 2 years ago. And now we also autumn calve a small percentage as well. Just actually to suit our daughters more than anything. And I'll explain a little bit about that in a minute. We have a big focus on efficiency and on the future. And not just on where we'll be in 5 years' time, but where we'll be in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time. That's always in the back of my head about how we will farm better. We prioritize animal welfare. We do that because that's the passion for the job we have. But also, as much as climate change worries us and worries the consumer, animal welfare will always be top of their agenda. And for us as farmers, any mishap there is always going to cause controversy and upset ultimately our customers in the supermarkets and in each and every household around the world. We farm to be sustainable for the climate, for the environment, but also as a family. And I think that has to be one of the big conversations for every organization, for every dairy processor, for every part of the ag sector, that, we need to build a sustainable future with the climate, but a sustainable farm model for farms all around the world, because as much as they're challenged by climate change, a lot of the narrative and a lot of the conditions they farm in and how climate change is affecting farms directly on the ground is affecting the wellness and the sustainable of the very people that produce the food on our planet. This is the future of our farm. And you'll probably wonder, why did I put up a photo of two young girls holding show cows? But they are the people that are going to be farming the land that I farm in 10 years and in 20 years' time. We try to always look to the future to show them that science and research can, and will deliver for our farms. And I think for them too, they probably, well, it mightn't be genetics, but they certainly have that drive and determination. That photo was actually taken at our national championships this year because both our daughters show dairy stock. And to put it in context, this is only their second year at national championships. Our middle girl, Becky, is 16. She's national champion. But both of them made the top 5 of the country, and Becky is now through to the British National Championships. So she has to have a passion for cows and a love for cows to do that, but she has to have drive and determination and work ethic. combined with that passion to be successful. And I think, climate change is about, and reducing emissions is about being successful as individual farmers and as an ag industry. Just to give you a bit of a picture of Irish and EU agriculture, and maybe add a little bit of confusion to what we're talking about. This is 2021 data, but the same pretty much now. Irish ag produces 37.5% of Irish agricultural emissions. God, we are the bad boys in town. We are. Why we should actually stop feeding people and just move to an alternative food source. If you're gonna get hung up on that figure, let's get it into context. So Irish ag, we don't have big industry. We don't have oil. We don't have steel. We don't manufacture cars. We're very much tech, pharmaceutical, and ag-based industry. So it's easy to portray us as a bad industry when it comes to climate. But we contribute 16 billion euros to our economy as dairy farmers. We export 90% of the dairy we produce worldwide. We produce 10% of the world's baby formula. So while you could say, let's move Irish dairy to another part of the world, every dairy industry around the world is very, very good at what they do. In Ireland, traceability, we have that in a nutshell. So we can stand over the baby formula that we produce and export it right across the world and command that market. And, as much as dairy farmers in other parts of the world, are exceptionally good at what they're doing, we don't need health scares in the baby formula industry, and Ireland is able to stand over the product that it produces. So last year, 2022, there was a big discussion on setting sectoral targets for every industry in Ireland. Big controversy over what ag was going to do. There was talks that it would go to 30% reduction by 2030. Then they were saying, oh, good, maybe 25%. I was kind of looking at it and I was kind of thinking, why are we going to spend 3, 4, 5 months wasting our time arguing over this? Set a goddamn target, tell me where I have to go and let me get on with the job. Then to add to the confusion, we agreed on 25% for ag. So it's 25% reduction by 2030. 2030 is not far away in my mind. I'm farming for what I'm going to do in 2, 3 years' time. But politicians, yet again, not happy. And they think 25% isn't enough. And I think 25% isn't enough. I don't need a headline to tell me that. Let's be clear. 2030 is a stepping stone. We're going to net zero. We have a 2050 target. So, 25% isn't really stuck in the back of my head. I would be very much, someone sits that down on the table in front of me, I would be saying, right, let's overachieve this, get on with the job and get to 2050 a hell of a lot quicker. As I said, big chat about cattle culling in Ireland to save the climate. And that news headline has gone all over the world. Now we've rolled back from the idea because the dairy processors have said they need to be compensated for the waste of processing facilities. And let's be clear, if you cull 200,000 dairy cows in Ireland, not a great impact on the global dairy herd. And we're going to a planet of 9 billion people that need to be fed. So I'm sure some other country in the world is going to kind of say, hey, we're going to go up 200,000 cows, and the global dairy herd stays stationary and nothing happens with climate change. This is really, really, really a big driving headline for me. COP26. 100 world leaders pledged to cut methane emission levels by 30% by 2030. And they committed to doing this with great urgency. And I'm kind of looking I'm still trying to find the great urgency. So if someone does find great urgency in the next 5 hours, please pass it on to me, because I'm getting a flight back to Ireland. I write for the biggest newspaper in Ireland, and I love doing it because as a dairy farmer, it makes me look at things around the world, see how people do things differently, and see how I can farm better and how I can communicate that to other farmers. If there is an organic dairy farmer in the room, I greatly apologise, but this is one of the big headlines in Ireland today that I will not be switching to organic at any time soon. Sounds really bad, sounds really negative. But I'm looking at what the consumer wants. You know, what can we sell to the consumer? And to put that in, that article is actually really factual based, that the consumer does not want organic in Europe. The market is oversupplied, and they're looking to convert Arla are looking to convert 100,000 tonnes of their organic dairy back to conventional as fast as possible, because they do not want to see their suppliers go out of business, which is happening right across Europe day in, day out. German dairy farmers are going out of business because they can't make money at organic dairy. And while I'm the bad guy in town, data released at COP27 showed that Dublin Airport, which I flew from yesterday and flying back into tomorrow morning, is actually the biggest polluter in Ireland. But because we don't count aviation emissions, you can still sell it to the public that I'm the bad guy in town. And don't get me wrong, I believe we need airplanes and we need to fly around the world. That is the way the world lives. Just to give you a few sustainability facts on our farm. We increased our dairy herd by 300% when EU milk quotas went in 2015. Sounds like, you know, when they're talking about reducing cow numbers in Ireland, I'm one of the bad guys. I increased cow numbers. But maybe this keeps in context. We increased milk output by 700%, you know, within a couple of years. So from a climate perspective, the cow I am milking now is a hell of a lot more efficient than the cow I was milking pre-2015. We've reduced our fertilizer usage in the last 3 years by 40%. And we're chipping away at that every year, and we feel we can drive that down a lot more. All the fertilizer that we spread is protected urea, so it has a protective coating to reduce emissions, but we've actually managed to start using a hell of a lot less fertilizer. 13% of our farm is available to nature, so biodiversity is a big player for us on the farm. That is an EU figure that has been audited and through satellite imagery. So as intensive as we are, we're very mindful of the environment, of how and know that we are custodians of the land and the biodiversity around us. Genetic gain, we've doubled. We run a genetic gain about twice the national average, and actually twice the top 100 herds in Ireland. And we've done that through genotyping, and we've really got our heads down into that in the last decade, and really driven genetic gain to milk a better cow. And I guess it boils down to not just doing things right, but having a passion. I love genetics. Genetics, you know, we can do so much more with genetics, and we will do so much more as a global industry, and we as farmers and we as an industry need to focus on that. We retain cows in the herd for longer, which reduces their carbon footprint. I have a lot of cows doing 10, 11 lactations. We actually have a bull in AI this year, and I'm milking his dam, his granddam, and his great granddam. And I think when you put longevity into any dairy herd, it always reduces the carbon footprint, because you're not rearing a heifer for 2 years before she starts producing milk. We use heat recovery on our milk tanks, so we're extracting all the heat from the cooling process and heating water up to 75 degrees. And we've been doing that with a number of years. We're using a lot of clover on the farm, which basically takes nitrogen out of the air, fixes it into the soil, and saves us having to spread chemical nitrogen on the land. So we've in the last 2 years, we've probably upped our farm to about 30% clover, and we continually move to do that every year. We use all low emission slurry spreading, so we're injecting it into the ground to reduce the emissions that we're creating from our manure. I guess this is why it was really brought here. And it's not a sales pitch, trust me, because as much as I know the Bovaer guys really well, they know my stance on Bovaer and methane reducing additives. But just going back to the headlines that I put up about sectoral targets for Ireland last year on 25% reduction by 2030. So I listened to so many radio interviews, and it was like, oh my God, there's a methane reducing additive. That might be the future. And I was kind of like, is this fairy dust that I'm going to sprinkle on the cow and she's going to burp a hell of a lot less? Or do I hear what, we talked about magic wands earlier, maybe the magic wand was going to just put it into her. And so I just started Googling. The journalist in me got that hunger to go searching, and I stumbled across Bovaer. I thought, God, this is not the future, this is the now. This is actually there. It's a new licensed product. And this is what I found. DSM, they put the Green Cow team together in 2010, looking to find a methane reducing additive, see what they could do with it over the course of, 12 years work, 54 peer-reviewed papers. We hear so much, about not using things until we get a definite figure. But right throughout the process, DSM were confident that on a TMR system, they could stand over a 30% reduction of methane, enteric methane from dairy cows. Just going back, I know Justin would love something like this within the beef industry, and it will come here in time. It's not licensed for beef in Europe yet, but trials in that have showed a 60 to 90% reduction in Australia, and I know they're researching it right across the world at the moment. Again, we go back to legislation and policy. It takes about 2 years to get a license for a product like this in Europe. So our hands are kind of tied behind our back because the paper trail and policy is not running fast enough for us. So it was licensed in early 2022 for in-calf or lactating bovines. And I kind of thought to myself, God, if the license is there, it's not fairy dust. I need to get this on farm. So we got in contact with DSM. We spoke to our dairy processor, but there was no great hunger for it. After months, we finally got it on farm. We started feeding it in September of 2022. Since we've started feeding it, there was trials done in Moore Park on a winter feed diet showing a 26% reduction in Ireland, a dry cow diet. So for any of you that doesn't know what a dry cow is, a cow needs a 6 to 8 week holiday in late lactation before she has her next baby calf. To get that bit of rest and recuperation and recharge the batteries before she knuckles down and goes back to work. So that dry cow period, they were getting a 22% reduction on methane from dairy cows. I actually heard at a dinner last week that there's a trial recently been done in Italy that showed a 45% reduction on the emission, the methane from the dairy cows in that herd. So, while some figures like to talk down these products, some organisations, there's a lot of plus, which is always why we look at the baseline of a kind of a 30% reduction for our herd. It's been trialled and fed in 20 countries. I know you guys are in the US. We'll see the license granted in the second quarter of 2024. It's been approved for feeding in 47 countries right around the world. And to date, through the trials they have done and working directly with processors, and this doesn't actually count hours. No, it would only be, I wouldn't be adding too many tons to it, but they've saved 55,000 metric tons since it was licensed in the EU. And I think, look, we all see the urgency of climate change. So I question myself, why are some countries allowing farmers to sit in their hands and not get on with it? Every bit counts, in my opinion, to try and just keep below the 1.5. So as I said, we started feeding it in September of 2022. We were the first dairy farm in Ireland to start feeding a methane-reducing additive. Many of you will wonder why. Why did this guy get the magic fairy dust from the Netherlands onto a farm in Ireland? Is he a tree hugger that's just absolute driven to save the world? I believe in science and research. I believe in standing up to policy and saying, I can do this. There are the tools out there. Stop talking down the ag industry. Start beefing it up. We want to produce food. We want to be the best in the world at what we do. And I think there's so much conversation about how do we get farmers on board and how do we get them to buy in. Make no mistake, for me as an EU and an Irish dairy farmer, my hands are tied behind my back, and it's policy that is really, really holding me back and not letting me drive forward. We fed it to autumn calving cows. So yes, look, we milk 180 cows, and we only fed it to 20 cows. I made that decision really clear. The diet that we were feeding, we wanted to guarantee that we were getting a 30% reduction. We didn't want this kind of, we don't really know what the reduction is. It was very clear cut. We had the diet analysed. We were getting a 30% reduction on 20 cows within our herd. I get zero credit for that reduction. I don't need a pat in the back. But when you go back to the 37.5% of Irish emissions are coming from ag, that figure is actually skewed because, there's so many things that we can and are doing that, farmers aren't getting credited for in the national inventory. It costs us €8 a cow a month, so it's a big financial outlay if I was to go to the 180 cows. We got no incentive. We never asked for an incentive. We believe in what we believe in our farm. We were happy to pay it. Just to keep that in context, when you scale things up, costs come down. We were one farm that had to have this shipped from the Netherlands to Northern Ireland to add a buffer to it because we were feeding it as a farm pack of 0.8%. So we couldn't feed it at feed mill strength because it wouldn't be safe on farm. So you have all the haulage costs, etc., all the handling costs. But with scale, those costs come down. And if you're running it through a feed mill and making thousands of ton of feed a day, it will greatly come down. We were feeding 24 kilos dry matter intakes per cow per day. So we feed through the TMR, those 20 cows through a TMR diet. So we have a great handle on what they're getting fed every day. And for those of you that don't know how Bovaer works, so it has to be in the cow's diet 24 hours a day. She needs to consume Bovaer every 3 hours through feed to hit that magic 30%. And what it does is it suppresses an enzyme inside the rumen that triggers methane production. And then it breaks that, through that process of suppressing the enzyme, it turns it into natural products that the cow already secretes. So while it is a synthetic product, it is converting enzymes from a cow into natural products that they are going to excrete anyway. And as I said, we had the diet analysed by the DSM team to guarantee that we were getting a 30% reduction. We were the first farm in Ireland. There's a couple of trial farms since, but that's 12 months now since we started feeding it. What has policy done to reduce global methane to fight climate change? They've sat in their hands for 12 months. And they'll probably sit in their hands for another 5 to 6 years. And the way things are looking, there's no hunger out there to say to farmers, come on, let's get on with this. The challenges, so the top picture there is so that's our feed rail where the cows are being fed in the winter. That black cow there, she's one of the first cows that was feathered on our farm and was actually going to a show. So for any of you that haven't seen the product, it's kind of like a white flowery product. So we were measuring it out 165 grams per cow per day. So you increase the grams based on kilos of dry matter you're feeding. So we were very, very precise about how we were feeding it on farm. With everything, there's challenges. And as I said, this is not a sales pitch. Do I believe something better than Bovaer will come along? Absolutely, because you know something, if I didn't believe that, I think science and research would have failed me. Probably not the greatest sales pitch for DSM, but hey, I don't work for them. They didn't give it to me for free. But you know, when I really looked at Bovaer and DSM, I kind of thought, wow, this is one of the biggest players in the world. They put a lot of work into this. They've done a lot of research. If they don't get better, they've failed me. You know, and I know for some of you know that it doesn't work in a grass-based system. You're probably only going to get about a 10% reduction if you're feeding cows on a grass-based system because they're only going to get fed twice a day in the parlour. But then again, the other side of that is that 2 years' time we'll have a slow release version that I can feed the 180 cows and get 30% across the herd. So that has been worked on. They know it's a challenge, but with every challenge comes solutions, and I don't believe that fighting climate change is going to work if we stay negative. We need to stay positive. As I said, I get zero credit in any way for reducing methane on a farm. I think policy lacks vision. And that's not an off-the-cuff farmer comment, that I'm not an anti-vaxxer or anything like that. I look at policy and see how policy can really support me as a food producer. And it doesn't, because I'm looking at what the consumer wants, how are we really going to sell climate change to the consumer? And I think in Europe we've lost, policy has lost the consumer. You kind of, every time you put up something, it's kind of like, if I put up something as a farmer, it's, I'm the bad guy in town no matter what I say. And, if a policymaker puts up something, he'll get laughed at. But, we shouldn't be laughing at other people. But at the same time, it's, don't tell me I need to, as a politician, that I need to use public transport when you haven't actually created a public transport network for me. So there's a good reason why we've lost people. We're not moving at a fast pace in Ireland. The anti-ag environmentalists, and I think that will probably be a huge challenge for the processors, and I guess for EDF, working with big companies around the world, that the anti-ag environmentalists are constantly questioning things, so they're putting that bit of doubt in the consumer's mind. Are these guys really reducing by 30%? And with everything we do, but make no mistake, for me, as I've looked at a lot of these organizations, and it's finance coming from both sides. If you want to produce an alternative food source or lab grown or anything like that, you want to make big profits. So you need people out there making a lot of noise against your competitors to try and convince the consumer that this is the way to go. A lack of policy and understanding for what consumers will buy into. Just remember the organic headline that I have in the Irish media today. The consumer does not want organic. The consumer wants planet-friendly foods. And I can guarantee you, if you talk to Danone, if you talk to any one of the big players in the world, talk to their marketing teams, what is going to be the sales pitch on the supermarket shelf? Planet-friendly, regenerative, one or the other. Organic is kind of pitched in the middle, and it's just been squeezed by those two. And it is really about selling climate change to the consumer, and putting something that they can trust on a supermarket shelf and say, yeah, look, I'm going to buy that because I know the food that I am eating is kinder to the climate. Just run through these pictures. So this is one of the first dairy, or this is the first dairy cow in Ireland to compete at our national dairy show that produced 30% less methane. She didn't do any better in the showing for it, but she still won her class. So, and she didn't burp halfway through the class, or fart, for the people that get confused about which end it comes out. And that trophy, actually, it was really interesting. DSM had entered the Innovation Awards at the National Dairy Show, and they also won the overall title for innovation within the dairy sector in Ireland. And I think, unbeknownst to me, I knew some of the judges, and I met them after, and they saw me wearing that T-shirt, and they were, "Oh my God, are you feeding this?" I was, yeah, because we didn't make a big song and dance about it. We just wanted to get on and do it. But here we're here tonight, and we are feeding it. And they were kind of like, "Why is this not being talked about? Why is this not being pushed on farms?" So, really key people in the industry that were kind of like, we should be just getting on with the job of feeding this and reducing emissions. What is the future? As I said, I'm looking to where I'm going to be in 2040, 2050. And when you guys are, really looking at methane, this, for me, sums it up. I'm feeding a methane-reducing additive. I really love genetics. I love genotyping. We've started genotyping through CMEX. So we're genotyping animals a second time. We're finding out which are the most methane-efficient dairy cows on our farm. Some will argue with the research. I'm sure they'd argue with the Bovaer research. But ultimately, I need to deal with what science and research is in front of me right now and get on with the job. And, what's the point in waiting until 2030, 2040 to start that genotyping process if I know that if I started now, I can breed a 20% reduction by 2050. And ultimately, when everything is cumulative, so when you look at what we're doing on farm at the moment and how we're reducing fertilizer and how we're working with energy and breeding a more efficient cow, and then you start to put everything together, it snowballs, and you have a huge impact on climate when you start to snowball everything in together. So it is so many tools that are going to help ag and dairy get to where it needs to be. And the reason I have the other slide up, and maybe you'll be kind of wondering why has he got a lot of hands up there. I say to every researcher, scientist around the world, for me and my colleagues in the dairy industry, put your hand up and show me what we can do. And let us get on with the task, because, dairying has evolved around the world because ultimately we do always believe we can farm better. We do what we do because we have a passion for it and we want to do it better. And just show us every little step that we can make a change, because we want to feed people around the world and continue to do so. I firmly believe this, and that light switch needs to be up on that wall for one reason. Every country likes to talk down at the opposition dairy industry. And for me, as a grass-based dairy farmer in Ireland, I should be shunning upon, the millions of cows that are intensively farmed in the US on an indoor system. And I kind of look at that and I kind of think, no, God, yeah, these guys have high welfare standards. They're farming 1, 2, 3, 20,000 cows on farms. They have to be at the top of their game. They have to prioritize welfare, because if you don't prioritize welfare in a dairy cow, she will not be efficient for you. And they're running big, big businesses. And I kind of looked at Bovaer last year and I kind of thought, God, the Yanks would cut their right arm off to get their hands on this, because, the system is poised to literally flick that switch if you're willing to put Bovaer on every US dairy farm and be, probably the leading global climate-friendly dairy industry in the world, the second producer of dairy, but probably in a better position than India to roll this out. Bovaer won't pay me for saying that, and I'm sure there's some other guy going to come along and with a 40% reduction, but once the product is licensed, I think you can roll it out across dairy farms in the US. And I think that boils down to what the consumer wants, really, because, if I walk into a room in China and say, right, guys, you want 6 months of dairy, you want 200,000 ton of dairy product, and I keep all my cows out of grass. This is my price for that contract. And then a US dairy farmer walks in to the office next door and says, hey, heard you met Pete. Do you want 200,000 ton of dairy product for the next 6 months? Well, we've got a 30% methane reduction guaranteed on our product. We know our product is planet friendly. Chinese guy's going to say, well, are you going to give it to me at the same price as Pete? Absolutely, yeah, because look, it's a world dairy market. We are all governed by world dairy market prices. Chinese guy's going to stand up and he's going to say, yeah, I'll take the stuff from the US. Same price. Consumer, I'll feel better about buying it. Consumer's going to buy it. It's reducing global dairy emissions. Shove it on the table. So is grass-based king? No. Planet-friendly is king. So as I said, look, the US license is going to be granted in the second quarter of 2024. Second largest dairy producer in the world. I would say the policymakers in the US, get your calculators out, kids, and calculate how much methane you can save in 12 months off of 226 billion pounds of milk. And see, do policymakers really, really stand over what they said in COP26 about reducing global methane. I looked at New York Climate Week, and I loved the concept as an EU dairy farmer, because I'm so used to the negative, and I saw their headline. Can we? We will. And I think that buys into how we can really save the world. Do we move from the negative to the positive? And I try to stay positive in everything I do in life. And can we reduce emissions? Absolutely, we can all day long. Some of you might know who said this, but I'm going to leave you with this message. As a dairy farmer and as a dairy industry, can we reduce emissions? And I stole this from a US president. It was, for me, a really, really positive individual. It's Federling. That's a few words of Irish for you. Barack Obama said it in Dublin in 2011. Maybe he wasn't talking about dairy emissions, but I think, that vibe across our industry of is Federling. Yes, we can. I think that's the way we need to farm, and the way we need to look, and the way we need our entire industry and every one of you guys to kind of say, yes, we can. And I think when globally we go with that message, will you get farmer buy-in all day long? Thank you very much.